Welcome to the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, where we have open and honest conversations about co-parenting, separation, divorce, and the hardest question of all, should you stay or should you go? I'm Kate Anthony, your Divorce Survival Guide, and I'm here to help you navigate some of the roughest waters you've ever swum in and answer some of your toughest questions. I've been to hell and back. And now it's my mission in life to help you get to the other side of this process with your sanity and your heart intact.
Happy New Year! I hope you had a healthy, happy, and restful holiday. My guess is that you may have spent a lot of it in turmoil. And as the new year rolled in, you may be more ready than ever to make some changes. And if that's the case, I got to tell you, you are far from alone. They say that January is divorce month. Yeah, they named it that. And I can, without hesitation, say that that's because of the number of us who just hit the end of our ropes over the holiday and end up setting New Year's intentions to finally make a change come hell or high water, which is exactly what happened to me on Christmas Eve 11 years ago. So if this is you, please know that I have got you. I know exactly what you're going through. Even if this isn't you, you know I got you too. But if you're at this stage right now and know that you're going to need strength to get through everything that comes next, I'm going to be running a live version of my program Rooted, which will start on February 3rd. So this is my 6-week introductory program that's designed to help you find your strength, build your confidence, and step into your power. So there's a link in the show notes so you can find out more information. And I'm going to be talking about it quite a bit in my Facebook group coming up. So there's a link to join that too if you're not already in there. Here's the thing. You can get through this alone. Or you can get through it with the hands of a community of women on your back, along with one kick-ass coach who's been through all of this. So I know which one I would choose, and I'm really hoping that you're going to join me for this 6-week journey. I don't run live programs very often anymore, so this is a great opportunity to sort of get in the trenches and be on weekly calls with me and do work with a group of women, but being led by me specifically. So I hope you will join us in that. So, about today's episode, I have an amazing guest with me today, Megan Hunter. Megan is an expert on high conflict disputes, complicated relationships, and borderline personality disorder. She's the co-founder of the High Conflict Institute, along with author and speaker Bill Eddy, who developed the high conflict personality theory. Megan developed the concept of the Institute after 13 years in family law as the family law specialist with the Arizona Supreme Court and child support manager of the Dawes County Attorney's Office in Nebraska. She is the CEO of Unhooked Media, a U.S.-based media company, and she's the author of the High Conflict Co-Parenting Survival Guide, Dating Radar, and Bait and Switch. So the bottom line is, if you're involved in a high conflict co-parenting situation, this episode is going to shed a lot of light on some super important issues for you. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Megan Hunter. Megan Hunter, thank you so much for being here and joining us on the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. I am super excited to have you here.
Well, I am super excited to be here. So thank you for having me. And it's my pleasure to be, on your podcast, which is awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So, all right, your main thing, everything you do really is about high conflict. You are the co-founder of the High Conflict Institute with Bill Eddy. Like, this is your realm, is high conflict.
Yeah. And my co-founder at High Conflict Institute, Bill Eddy, we kind of, people refer to us sometimes as Mr. High Conflict and Mrs. High Conflict, even though we're not married and we're not, Of
Yeah.
course, it's business partners, but
Yeah.
it is kind of funny to be referred to as, the high conflict people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank God, right? Because I don't know if I'm curious actually about your experience. Are you finding this to be an increasing problem?
We are. When we started HCI about, 13 years ago, it was in 2008. Um, High conflict cases were a problem then in the divorce courts. That's sort of where we had our starting days. And Bill at that time was saying, look, high conflict people, just these high conflict disputes are going to be increasing in the next 10 years, in the next decades. And, it turns out he was right, because we go back now to some of the same people that we trained a decade ago. They'll come to a training, or, many people have stayed in touch, and we'll ask them, are you seeing an increase in high conflict disputes in your caseloads, in your professional realm? And the answer is always, yes, we are. And in fact, I was training in Australia back in June, and one woman said, she was an attendee, she was a lawyer, a family law attorney. She said, what I've found interesting the last 5 years is I've had more stranglings in my caseload than in my previous 25 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was a kind of that moment. Yeah, it's right to the gut. So, I mean, that's a pretty extreme one, but I think we're just seeing more, a heightened sense of conflict, of blame, of high drama, and just it's kind of like it's my right to be upset and be in conflict with somebody.
So, okay, I have so many questions right now about everything you just said. I mean, the first is, what made Bill Eddy make that prediction? I mean, it's sort of interesting, like, right, we can look at it in hindsight. Do you know how he saw that in foresight?
Well, there are certain people that just sort of have that vision, for the future, and he's one of those guys. Yeah, I think because of his background as a mental health professional, and then he became a lawyer, and he actually started as a kindergarten teacher, so he's kind of seen the whole, spectrum. And just years of experience led him and I think looking where we're going as a culture, right? Yep. What is happening in pop culture, what's happening on television, in music, and the trajectory pointed to more conflict and less emotional stability, higher anxiety, and all of that just leads to more conflict.
Wow. You can look back and be like, yes, of course there was a path here. To me, it's just distressing how much this is increasing in my client load. And for the most part, I'm dealing with people, because I'm a life coach, right? Mm-hmm. So when women are coming to me, they're obviously people who are interested in doing work, right? They're interested in personal development. And so they tend to be less more conflict averse, right? Mm-hmm. And more involved in relationships though with men. So do you see it more with men than women, or do you see it as being equal? I mean, I see it because I'm looking at one side, right? Because I'm really just working with women. But what is your experience and the data? What does the data show at this point?
It's pretty interesting. We do in every training we give, we do kind of a gender test of the audience, to see if they believe that there are more women that behave this way or more men. We have kind of 5 different categories, and we test people on them, and it's really so interesting because we don't even know how many people we trained at this point, but let's say at least 250,000. There's never been one room where they've gotten it right, because there's this real bias that women are histrionic and kind of psycho and crazy, when a man could have the same exact behaviors but be called, said to have anger management issues, right? And it's, we don't have to diagnose or label people, but if we avoid looking at gender and we just look at behaviors, you can get a lot further, because then you can apply techniques, the right techniques to help people, and to, kind of to deal with people. So I really like doing the test because it busts all those gender stereotypes.
Yeah.
And we really see, I mean, it's kind of amazing to see. Every room, it's the same thing 100% of the time.
So what you see is people saying that women are more hysterical and that women are more high conflict, and the truth is that men tend to be. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying it's really pretty equal. It's just
it is equal. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, that was a long answer.
No.
To get to the nugget, but it was, it's either side can have, either sex can have these high conflict traits, these high conflict behaviors. So I think, as females, we're like, oh, we can never find a good man. There are no good men out there, but it's really not true.
Yeah.
There are women with bad behaviors. There are men with bad behaviors. And you've just got to be smart. Bill and I read another book called Dating Radar. And it's about just being smart about who you choose to have in your life, who you choose to have children with, get married to, live with, be financially entangled with, romantically involved with. All that's so important to be smart. Whether you're a woman, you've got to look out for these. There's like 4 main characteristics that you really have to watch for and be aware of. And, that's a whole nother line, but yeah.
Well, no, actually I do want, let's talk about those.
Okay.
I mean, this is what people are dealing with, right? And so I'm assuming that you are talking about the high conflict personality, right? The 4 traits of a high conflict personality.
Yes, that is exactly it.
So tell us what those are.
Okay, so essentially it's the first one is sort of this all or nothing thinking. Well, she doesn't like me, so I'm out of here. They treated me poorly, so they're out of my life forever. It's just a lot of all or nothing. Yeah. So that's the first. The second is unmanaged emotions, and that's just, like kind of beyond the norm, right? Because any of us can be overly emotional at times, but there's a pattern to this where there's maybe high anxiety a lot of the time, or an intensity to the emotions that is absent in most people. It's like someone that tells you this really, really intense story, and you're drawn in, but eventually you kind of want to back away because it's so intense. It's blowing up, cursing, yelling, screaming, just sort of a pattern of this, right? And then the third is extreme behaviors, extreme actions. And so you see this kind of this high conflict personality type individual doing things that 90% of people wouldn't do. Right. So it may be slashing someone's tires. It may be jumping out of a moving car. It could be posting something, like naked pics on social media of someone else, or public shaming, withholding, making accusations of abuse that aren't really true. Those are extreme actions.
Yep.
And then the fourth and kind of the key to it all is the blaming.
Right.
So I'm a victim. It's all your fault.
Yep.
It's someone else's fault. There's always a target of blame when anything doesn't go quite their way or whatever. It's just such an immediate assignment of blame. And what people don't understand is that they honestly believe that it is someone else's fault, that someone else caused them these problems, even though they're the ones that caused them themselves. And those on the outside can see that, but they can't.
Yes. You're describing someone that my family is embroiled with. There are mixed personality disorders involved. It is exhausting.
Yeah.
I think that there is nothing more exhausting than being embroiled, especially in a legal battle with someone who is of a high conflict personality, because, especially when they have personality disorders, because they're not looking to solve the problem, right?
Right.
They're not looking for a
Right.
solution here. And I love what you guys talk about is that the issues are not really the issues, right? Like
Yeah.
you're not going to court with this person. This is not about trying to find a harmonious co-parenting solution, right? That's not what this is about.
Right.
And
right. It's go ahead.
no, I was going to say that the non-high conflict person keeps sort of going at it like we're just trying to find a solution here. But the other person, that's not what they're about, right?
Oh, bingo.
Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's because they're driven by something different. And that something different is this sort of high conflict personality that we have to remember they didn't ask for it. They don't know they have it. It's just their operating system. It's how they developed, which probably came maybe from some childhood trauma that's unresolved,
right?
Maybe some genetics, maybe some attachment disruptions when they were, in those formative years before age 5. There's a variety that we're all a recipe, but there's this one recipe that seems to develop into this sort of high conflict operating system. So for them, they're driven by what we call a fear-based operating system. So like if you have an iPhone versus an Android, they look the same. They do the same things for the most part, but there are a few differences. They have a different operating system inside.
Yes.
And it doesn't make one bad or one, they're just different. Uh-huh. And so what happens with us is we don't understand that this other person, we know they're different. We know they exhaust us and that there's chaos, but we don't know, kind of that they're driven by something different. So we think they're being very intentional about being this exhausting and difficult, when in reality, this is their operating system and it's all about brain function. And so this fear drives them. And so if you think about your own greatest fear, mine is driving on black ice, which is why I live in Arizona and I no longer live in Nebraska where there's black ice, especially this, currently we're near Thanksgiving where they had a huge storm. So when I'm in a car on black ice, I want to be out of that car. If I can't get out of the car, I want to be behind the wheel, because that means I'm in control, at least a little bit, right? Because we feel out of control. So we all have our fears and da-da-da. But with this sort of high conflict personality individual, their fear happens around people.
Yeah.
It's people interactions that create this. So there might be a fear of feeling inferior. And that is their operating system. So when I feel inferior, I need to feel in control again so that I can feel safe, right? And I just started reading about this polyvagal theory in the last couple of months. And essentially it, in a nutshell, you're in a safe state or in an unsafe state. And so when you're in a safe state, you're not in a fear state, right?
Right.
So let's say your operating system is the fear of feeling inferior, right?
Yep.
So when you're feeling superior, you're in your safe space. Yeah. And as soon as something makes you feel inferior, and it could be someone's tone of voice, it could be that someone got a promotion that you didn't get or a compliment you didn't get, anything that makes you feel inferior, your insides want you to feel safe again, because all of a sudden you now feel unsafe. And when you feel unsafe, your heart rate goes up, your anxiety goes up, and it all happens in microseconds. Yep. So you got to, this all happens really quickly, and that's when you start blaming and da-da-da. So that's what they're driven by. So the issue isn't the issue. In a big divorce case with millions of dollars, it could be, or let me rephrase that, it could be a divorce case with millions of dollars, or it could be $10. It doesn't matter, because the issue is not the issue.
Right.
So then it becomes a matter of how do we manage that? And the first step really is accepting that this is how it is. Right?
Yes. And, I just want to interject really quickly, because I think you're absolutely right. And I think that the trap that so many people fall into, and this is what I certainly find with my clients, is that, understanding their spouse's operating system becomes actually one of their bigger stumbling blocks, because then they have empathy. Usually, a lot of empaths are drawn to people who are in this high conflict personality type, right? Mm-hmm. And so then you've got an empath who's like, oh, I understand. It's his operating system. It's from his childhood trauma. It's from his, right. And then they go into having more compassion and wanting to help them heal their wounds instead of protecting themselves from the, inevitable behavior of this high conflict personality type. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? Like, does that make sense?
Absolutely. You're spot on. And it's one thing to accept. I mean, it's kind of required if you're going to be able to manage them, but a lot of people miss that management step. Right. It's like accept that this is how they are. So now I have to do something differently. I have to learn it's simple techniques, but I can no longer handle this relationship the way I used to. And now I need to protect myself, be aware, and learn some new skills and techniques. And I'm not the one to change them. They probably need changing, but I'm not the one. I can't do it. I don't have magical powers. And if you think back to, if you are one of those empaths listening, and you think, oh, everybody can change. Yeah, ish.
Sometimes.
Some can't and won't. Some will never have this awakening.
Yep.
They, in fact, most never will. And so if you have empathy for their childhood trauma, that's fantastic. But think about how long that's been building. That recipe's been brewing a long time, and you're not the one to undo all of that just through your love and support and compassion. So it's like finding out maybe you have a cancer diagnosis, and okay, now I need to accept it, but I also have to manage it. Now I have to do things very differently.
Right. And I really want to stress this for my listeners, because I think this is where so many women that I work with and that are in my Facebook groups and all of that really get stuck, which is they conflate acceptance with having to be continually victimized by this. Right? Yeah. And that's not what acceptance is, right? Accepting what is so does not mean you have to still continue to stand in it, or, stand in the firing line of it, right? And it's not your job to fix this. It's literally not your job. If the other person sees their own stuff, and if they see their own trauma and they want help for their own trauma, then they have to find a trauma-informed therapist for themselves and have to begin to do probably a lifetime of very difficult work. And it's not your fucking job to do it.
And there's a book title right there.
You're right. Not your fucking job.
Yeah, it's true. And I mean, there are some people who can change. And, when we're talking about personality disorders, there are some with borderline personality that do get better. They have some insight. They end up in some good, like dialectical behavior therapy treatment or schema therapy or something. Someone who's skilled at helping them, and they can get better. But they may have, like you said, they may fight it a long time. But you really need, if you're that person's partner, there are some successful relationships, but it's a dicey area.
Yeah.
The other types of personalities, there's some dangerous stuff out there. And Bill and I put a survey out before we wrote Dating Radar, because we had our theories, but we wanted to hear from people and to see, it's either kind of validate or not validate our theories. And, when you worked in the divorce business a while, it's pretty easy to figure out, see all the patterns of behavior and that's what informs the theories, right?
Right.
So this survey was so fascinating. And I think we have about 500 respondents, and, there were multiple choice questions and things like that, but we also had comment sections on many of the questions. And I tell you what, if you read those, you get pretty sharp about who you should avoid. Wow. Because it's people that have been in the trenches with someone with a high conflict personality, and it's there's so much regret I mean, there are people who also say it's wonderful that, I mean, I'd never regret having my kids and stuff like that. But, my life is hell, or I've lost my kids. I can't see my kids anymore. I've lost everything, my house, my mind, my finances, my da-da-da. And kind of circling back to what you said about people who accept and then kind of just get squashed then the rest of the relationship. What people need to understand is that's trauma for you. Right?
Yes.
And it may not feel like it in the moment, and you're surviving and you're handling and managing, but someday that stuff comes back to haunt you. And you don't even realize it until, you're drinking, taking too many pills.
Oh my God, yes.
Having anxiety, a lot of anger in relationships, it's there.
Yep. Been there.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, absolutely. It is trauma. It really is. It is 100% trauma. Megan, you have a book out about this, the High Conflict Co-Parenting Survival Guide. So given everything that we were just talking about with how difficult this is, how do we survive this in a because everything here's the thing that really frustrates me is that so often when we're dealing with high conflict personalities, right, all of the advice out there is go no contact. The only way to heal from a trauma bond is to go no contact. The only way to heal from an abusive relationship is to go no contact. The only way to heal from anything high conflict is go no contact. When you co-parent with someone, you don't have that luxury. So what do we do? How do we survive?
Well, I think sort of the first step is to get a plan together. You just have to stop and step back and do a lot of research, right? And understand what, how you need to proceed going forward. We wrote this book. My co-author is Andrea LaRochelle, who's this amazing woman up in Canada who does a lot of coaching for divorced parents who are co-parenting, and she's just really amazing. She wrote the majority of the book. I'll tell you that right now. She was a little more scheduled than I was during the writing of it. And she's on, she's doing the work every day with clients. So she really had that, in-person touch with them. But yeah, I tell people you got to look at this like a cancer diagnosis or any other kind of, severe medical issue, where you now really have to do things differently. And, the old adage about, putting on your oxygen mask first, that's what you really have to do.
Yep.
It's just tough in these situations because if you're, taking care of little kids, and you're probably working full time too,
right?
That's enough. That's a whole heck of a lot. And you're packing lunches and you're paying bills and you're doing laundry and that's what we do, right? And then you add on this layer of someone who is really trying to make your life hell.
Yeah.
And threatening trying to turn your own children against you, or to try to get your kids away from you and do no contact between you and them. There's a whole variety of situations, or every exchange when you're the kids are going from one parent to the other. There's all conflict every time, and you get that knot in your gut. You don't have to. It's big. It's huge. It's debilitating in many cases. And traumatic. So you have to get educated first, and remember that you have to take care of yourself. This is different now. And you've probably been through some pretty yucky stuff.
Yep.
For a while.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So there might need to be some therapy. You might need to see, consult with a life coach. Take whatever steps are necessary to help you heal and get grounded so you can co-parent. That's just the first step. And then there's all the techniques of trying, to co-parenting and managing the relationship. But the first one is taking care of you.
Yes. And that is, that can be so hard when you feel like you've got nothing left. And yet it is literally like nothing else you do matters if you're not doing that. And, I want to stress here, self-care, we taught what's, become, I think we're finally getting more educated. Although I don't know, because I'm a life coach and it's hard for me to know what's getting out to the masses and what's just like in my sphere.
Right.
But I think we're starting to understand that self-care is not about going and getting a mani-pedi and getting a massage. That self-care is about having an amazing therapist in your corner. Self-care is about spending, the time and the money on on your management, your psychological management team, whether that's your therapist, a coach, all of that, right? Whatever you need to keep yourself sane, so like you said, put your own oxygen mask on first, fill your own cup, whatever metaphor you want to use. You cannot take care of your children. You literally can't if you are dying on the inside. And so when we're talking about this, and we're really talking about self-care and therapy, if you can do therapy and coaching, my clients who get the most mileage out of their investments are doing therapy and coaching. Like my favorite coaching clients are the ones who are also in therapy. Like I can't get anywhere if you're not doing the work with a therapist as well. And I think that the tandem relationship between a coach and a therapist is really great, because I know a lot of therapists who love working with my clients too, because they're like, we're taking what we're doing here and then we're putting it into action, right? Like we're passing the baton back and forth. And I feel like if you have that foundation, you are golden.
Yeah.
At least from a foundational perspective.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I agree. Because it's you don't know the operating system that other person has. I mean, you sort of know it having been in a relationship with that person. However, the going forward part in co-parenting for 15 years or 18 years, you just really need to be well and then continually be well. And that's kind of why Andrea and I formulated this book the way we did. It started out sort of differently, and I don't even remember how we started, but as we wrote, we realized we need something where people can get on track, learn to take care of themselves 1 week, at least once a week.
Yeah.
It's almost kind of a reminder, and that's how we laid the book out, is just a lesson per week, a checklist every week to see if you're taking care of yourself, the successes you had that week, things you want to try to work on the following week, because we're going to screw up sometimes.
Absolutely. Yep, we are.
Perfect map to this. And so I think this gives you kind of a not only a roadmap, but just kind of a check-in for yourself, so you can see that, okay, so I screwed up and I screamed and hung up the phone or whatever. But next week, I think I'm going to try to, meditate more, or whatever, your goals are during that week. And then each week has a little lesson about, kind of getting rid of the what ifs in our life and all those little nagging doubts. And so we just tried to really get in the head of the person who's in the relationship, co-parenting relationship with a high conflict person, and try to maybe do some adjustments in that thinking, because we can get really bamboozled by that thinking sometimes, and we start to think that we're kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I hate women beating themselves up, like I love that you're talking about making mistakes, right? Because first of all, it's the design of the high conflict personality to make you make mistakes, right? Like they are looking for your triggers. They're looking for your buttons to push. And so when they push them and then you get triggered, like, of course you do. Like that's what they want from you.
Yeah, some big reaction.
Right. And so then they can stand back and be like, wow, you're crazy. Right?
Right.
So there's that, right? That this is literally the design of the process of the other person. And then also like, oh my God, you've been doing it one way for so long. And if you're doing something differently, it's brand new. This is a whole new way of operating for you. And of course you're going to fuck it up. Of course you are. And the last thing that you need is for you to beat yourself up about it and make yourself wrong about it. Right? So, you know, having the compassion, the self-compassion, and, you know, and the self-care to be able to go, okay, like I love that you include that, because it's, God, that's so important.
Yeah, it is. And I think you're really, you hit on something there with beating ourselves up. I think it's something we naturally do as women. And I think a lot of men probably do too, but in these relationships, we can tend to be really hard on ourselves. And then, you know, self-doubt creeps in, and there's so many things. So it's that's really why we wrote this book, is just to help people stay on track and remember, okay, I've got problems once in a while and I'm not perfect, but, you know, I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing the best I can. And, you know, and I, you know, I can take care of myself, and I can always do better next time. But what you said about them kind of pushing buttons and triggers, that's, I mean, there's a whole nother, you know, science around the hippocampus and the memory, and, you know, being around that person makes your heart rate go up and you feel unsafe, and, you know, you don't really have as much access to the logic part of your brain, the reasoning part. And so you get stuck over in reaction area. And I've just really started teaching it this way of, you know, I used to say right and left brain, and now I just say the reactionary and the reasoning brain, right?
My therapist used to say that it was my child brain versus my adult brain, right? And like,
that's true.
And which is in charge. But I would you know, I would love for you to dive into that just a little bit, because I think that's, I mean, it's the crux of this, right? It's why we react the way that we do. And I think it's incredibly important to talk about, to borrow a phrase, what is indelible in the hippocampus and how that impacts us in these relationships, right? I mean, I think it's one of the most important things that we can talk about, really.
Yeah, and I'm not,
or just because I'm a science geek.
Yeah, I know. Me too. A little bit of a brain geek. I mean, who reads the polyvagal theory in therapy on a 16-hour plane ride, except this girl?
Yeah, this girl too. I would totally read it. I wrote it down. I was like, oh yeah, I've been meaning to do some research on that. So you're piecing apart, Megan.
Fascinating stuff. We should do a plane ride together.
I know, right? Oh my God, it was so awesome.
Never shut up, would we? So. So I mean, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I've been doing this long enough. I kind of understand, I think, the reactionary place we are. And, you know, even if you're haven't been in a relationship with someone who gets under your skin, you know, it's just maybe a clerk at a store or something. There are people like that can get under our skin. But those other people that we've been in long relationships with, right?
Oh, yeah.
Your brain is remembering all that stuff, and you have body memory, and you have, you know, you can go into panic, you can, you know, have anxiety attacks, all of that. Just, you remember when you're around that person. Your body remembers it, your brain remembers it. And so that makes it harder for you to think logically.
Yep.
So that's why self-care is so darn important. So you prepare before you have a meeting with that person, whether it's an exchange or you're both going to the kids, you know, talent show at school. Anytime you're going to be around this other person, you need to have a checklist that you can check in on. You've got to be disciplined to do this. Doesn't take much, but just to remember, just put a reminder. Okay, before I see this person, I need to practice this, remember this,
Yep.
All right. So we go into it prepared. Because I find that it's when we're unprepared that we can panic, freak out, say things we shouldn't, you know, whatever. So if you go in prepared that, okay, I'm going to stay calm, I'm going to manage, I'm going to keep things arm's length, I'm going to meditate, whatever I have to do to feel okay when I'm around this person, and to not be reactionary, right?
Yep.
And if you find your heart rate going up, if you find yourself feeling anxiety, hatred, any of it, just take a piece of paper and a pen and start writing down a list about anything you can think of, like Christmas gifts, how to tie your shoe, your next grocery shopping, whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. It's the mere process of writing. It shoves you into the logic part of your brain.
Oh my God, that's
the thinking
brilliant,
part.
Megan. That's brilliant.
So it's just the quickest way, even, to dry up tears or anything. You just start writing a list, write anything down. And so your primary goal is to just get yourself thinking, because when you're thinking, you feel calmer. That's proven scientific fact.
Right.
Because you're now no longer in your reactionary brain. You need a lot of flow going back and forth between your two hemispheres, the reactionary and the logic. And the more, flow going across that bridge between them, the calmer you will feel and the better decisions you'll make. So when you get around that special someone that makes you feel so anxious, you're going to feel that anxiety. And so that's part of the preparation notes is, okay, I'm going to have a pen and paper. I'm going to do whatever I can do to make myself think. And that may be engaging in a conversation with someone else. Anything that will get you out of focusing just on that one person, that he or she is sitting, 5 feet away or 5 rows behind, or, coming around the corner or getting out of the car. So get yourself thinking, and that'll help you feel calm.
That's so brilliant. It's so simple and it's so easy to do, and it's utterly brilliant because it just completely activates the part of the brain that you need to be in control right now. Right. Because when that other part of your brain, the reactionary part of your brain, is in charge, you're kind of not to be trusted with your emotions. Like, you're not.
That's so good. Yes.
Right. Like, I always say, it's like your adult brain is asleep at the wheel and your child brain is completely taken over, and it's going to have a temper tantrum. It's going to have an anxiety attack, like anything, right? It's triggered.
Yeah. You're going to want to fight, flight. Let's see. I always those 3. Fight, the F after the F.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And it can be a different one at any given time. But
those are your only options when you're
those are your only options when you're in reactionary brain, and they're so powerful. Those brain mechanisms, the amygdala, all of that, who I have actually named Miggy. Because so many people had a hard time saying, how do you say that? Amygdala. So I just renamed him Miggy, or it could be a her. I don't care. But Miggy and the corpus callosum, that bridge between the right and left hemispheres, there's just, it's just incredibly powerful, and attentive to tone of voice and facial expressions and body language and all those things that we don't even know that our brain is watching out for us, right? From other people. And it's kind of doing it behind the scenes, like, is this person your friend or your enemy? Your friend or your enemy? And then it alerts us. And as soon as it alerts us that there's a threat, then our little bridge gets shut down over to logic land. Reactionary, I want to get the hell out of here, or I want to, I can't even talk. I'm just frozen. So just be prepared for that, and know, test it out and see what you can do to help, count to 10, start writing that list down, whatever it is, you can get yourself that bridge opened up over into logic part of your brain, where the calm emotions are going to help you feel better. And help you feel safe.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. That's it. Right. Because you suddenly feel not safe in your own skin, in your own brain, in your own body. Right. Yeah. And that's where things get really scary, is where you can't even feel safe in your own self.
It is. And there's just so many things happening in the body. When you get into that space, the cortisol is released, and that has an impact in your muscles and your whole system, your whole body, and then you're exhausted later.
Yes, absolutely. Right.
There's just so much, and I've been learning this at my advanced age about keeping my stress low, because I run a couple of businesses, I'm out speaking and training and blah, blah, blah. I always have too much going on.
Right.
And so I'm stressed a lot of the time.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I know. I figured it would be so foreign to you.
My life is just one big Zen party.
That's so nice. I need to just really hang out with you more.
No kidding. I think we need to hang out together anyway, but
I know. We talk polyvagal all the time.
So great.
But yeah, so I'm just trying to keep myself stress-free as possible, because it's so much harder on the body than I ever understood. And I now have adult kids, and you kind of look back on those years, and I was a divorced mom, and I didn't have a high conflict co-parent. I mean, we both intentionally chose. It could have gone high conflict, right?
Right.
But
absolutely.
We I don't know. We both just, I guess, had some special dispensation or something to say, okay, this isn't how we want it to go. Yeah. We've done fine ever since. But raising kids, all of those things, I've seen all the stresses that I've allowed myself to be under. Like, you have a choice when you're raising children, even adult children, or having a job, just living as a human being. You have a choice of whether to let something stress you out or not. And, and to what level. And I think a lot of times I've chosen stress, and that's very hard on the body.
Yeah.
At a time of life when you need the body to be, sort of strong and all that, you can be really worn down if you allow stress to do that. And these high conflict co-parenting situations are immensely stressful. So, I urge anyone who's involved in them to really take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Like you said, therapy is your best friend. Just to have that insight and wisdom, and, to have a life coach added onto that is just magnificent. So a support group, there's just a lot. It's surrounding yourself with positive advocates for helping you check yourself, helping you sustain, helping you, in whatever ways. But keep the naysayers and the negative people as far away as possible.
Yep.
Just don't need that. The people saying, "Oh yeah, your ex is such an asshole." You don't need that.
Yeah, right. There's a difference between support and people who sort of egg it on and inflate it, right? Like, your support system should be there for you to be a soft place to land, rather than to sort of inflate the experience of the stress, right?
Exactly.
There's a real difference in that. I'm glad you mentioned that. I really am.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we could talk about this all day. So I just want to, is there anything else that's sort of from your book? Because the high conflict co-parenting, I think, is really, so many of my listeners are going through that, or have fears about it. Is there anything else besides the self-care, any little nuggets that you want to impart to them before we part?
Yeah, I think the main things are, beyond taking care of yourself, first and foremost, is to learn a few simple techniques. And we have another book out called BIF.
Yes,
responding to
exactly where I was going.
It seems to be a game changer for people, because I'm sure any of you listening out there, you've been the recipient of a hostile email or text message or something, and Bill, he's the genius behind all of this, developed this technique of responding in a BIF way, which is brief, informative, friendly, and firm. And it's meant to contain the conflict. Instead of increasing the conflict, a BIF response will decrease the conflict. It doesn't mean it won't fire up again, but you have a choice whether you want to respond or not. Take some discipline. And then number two, if you decide you have to respond, you respond with a BIF response. And we have, parent educators and a variety of professionals around the world who require parents to read this book before they'll even let them come to a divorce education class or anything like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's a big nugget. And the other one is to remember that the person you're dealing with, you have the power to manage that relationship. You don't have to let it manage you.
Yes.
So, I mean, I'm not here to just tout our books, but this is what we do.
Please do.
So,
Please do.
it's, I would encourage you to read, there's a book, we have a second edition coming out of Don't Alienate the Kids. And it's just packed full of everything. There's so many nuggets in there.
Yeah.
But just really learning how to manage that relationship by setting boundaries, learning how to respond with, to put that person in a safe space. You can do that. You have the power. You just have to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
And I should mention ear. Bill also came up with responding with ear to calm someone. So when someone's really upset, someone's screaming or yelling, and you want to have limits and boundaries first, but to keep that person calm. Let's say you're in a divorce mediation, or, whatever. And the other person, your co-parent, is heating up and stuff. You can manage them using empathy, attention, and respect.
Yes.
And it's the opposite of what you feel like doing, because you may feel like choking them, or you may feel like running out of the room or crying or screaming because you're so upset. But you manage it with, I can understand. That's probably pretty frustrating.
Yep.
And you get them shifted over into thinking, right? So you calm people first with ear, and then you get them thinking by saying, so what ideas do you have that we could resolve this? Have you thought of anything?
Yeah. And, I think that what, I think a lot of people who are on the receiving end of this feel like that's so much work, right? It's like, why do I have to do all that work? And I think the answer to that is because if you're the energy that you're going to expend, if you're fighting, if you react in any other way, it's going to be it takes far more energy.
It does, and the results are awful.
Right? Exactly.
So
exactly.
It's really an interesting thing, and it's about getting what we call getting unhooked. You have to get unhooked from the emotionality of it, and it's hard when you're co-parenting, when it's your own kids, right?
Yep.
And someone's turning the kids against you, or it's just you're just kind of fighting it all the time. You don't want to be that person, but just like when when you have cancer, it's a hard job.
Yep.
You've had children with someone that's made this a hard job, right? And now you have to do things differently, and it does take some discipline. But once you get used to it and practice it, and it does take practice, you just practice, responding with empathy, attention, and respect, then get them thinking, then that puts you in the management chair. And that's where you really do find your sanity.
Yes. And your power, right? I mean, this is an empowerment exercise, because we feel like we're victims of this all the time, right? And we actually are not. We actually have the power to set the tone.
Yeah. Yep. And so it requires some confidence to start practicing. And then once you start practicing, you'll feel the results very quickly. It's the opposite of what you feel like doing, and it's the opposite of what they're expecting you to do.
Yes.
Right? And so when you use empathy, attention, and respect, ear, on someone, that puts them back into their safe space again. They go from fear to safety.
Yep.
And when people feel safe, they feel okay around you again. So you want your co-parent feelings in a safe space.
Yep.
Now, if they're being jerks and they're screaming, yelling, stalking, and those things you need to set limits. Yep. There are consequences and boundaries you have to have as well.
Yep.
But if you're at that school function, or at the graduation, and that person starts coming at you a little bit, you just give them some empathy, attention, and respect, and it'll calm them down, make them feel safe. When people feel safe, they can think. And when people are thinking, they feel calmer.
Brilliant. Utterly brilliant.
Mic drop.
Like, exactly. I mean, literally.
If I could just practice what I preach all the time.
Well,
and that's important to say too,
yes,
is
it
that
is. It is.
we don't have the market cornered on this individually, right? And when you're co-parenting with someone, these are techniques that work, but you have to keep using them, because this other person is not going to change just because, stuff keeps flaring up. But the more you use ear and biff with them,
Yep.
The calmer the whole relationship will be.
Yes. Yep. And the better you're going to feel about yourself. That's, I always say this, is that, the idea of keeping your own side, this is the definition. I want everybody who always hears me say this, I want you guys to hear this. This is the definition of keeping your side of the street clean. When I talk about that, I always say, it doesn't matter what's going on. There could be a fucking tornado happening on the other side of the street. If you are keeping your side of the street clean, you are going to shift the dynamic in this relationship. And this is exactly what I mean. You may not feel like having empathy for the asshole who's making your life, a living hell. But if you think of it as a strategy, first of all, you're more apt to do it. But also, at the end of the day, you're going to feel like you did not get ripped off of, the foundation of your own value system and what you want to create for your children, and the peace and clarity that you want in your own life. So this is that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it is. It is. And you're teaching your children.
Yes.
You're role modeling for your children.
Yep.
How to have empathy, attention, and respect, and set limits and have boundaries.
Yes.
That's where we really, even I still have trouble with setting limits and boundaries. In fact, Bill is writing a book, I think, next year on setting limits with people with high conflict personalities. So that, it's really the hardest thing to do.
Oh, it is because their entire MO is to knock down any barrier that you set up, right? Any boundary that you set, they're like, woohoo, there's a goal. I'm not going to head for it. So it really is. It is such an exercise. It's so difficult. And I want to say the other thing that you're modeling to your kids, especially if you're dealing with a high conflict co-parent, is that you're educating them on how best to deal with this co-parent, how best to relate to them as well, right? And so even though my ex and I are not high conflict at all, we were when we were married, and we have gone into high conflict, flares, of course, and so when my son is afraid of daddy's temper, or he's afraid of like talking to his dad about something, or his dad finding out about something, I'm able to educate him and like, oh, honey, I totally get it. Daddy does react that way. Here's how I found is the best way to communicate with dad about something like this, right? Yeah. And then we're giving them tools to be able to manage high conflict people in their own lives, which whether it's their parent or not, they're going to need. But especially to teaching them how to have a healthy, boundaried relationship with a parent who they might need that with.
Well said. It's so true. They really, really need it, because especially, any tools you can give them so that when they are away from you and at the other parent's home, which they will be, they go, prepared with those tools, so they don't feel, beaten down or afraid, or they can have more confidence in managing that. And it's interesting, some kids actually learn those skills intuitively or innately and experientially, just by having a parent like that, but they still need those tools, and they need protection from anything that goes beyond into abuse or anything like that.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, Megan, this has been so great. I am so happy that we got to have this conversation. People can find you over at the High Conflict Institute, right?
That's right.
And your book is on Amazon. Everything will be linked in the show notes, as it always is. But the book is the High Conflict Co-Parenting Survival Guide. Is there anything else that you want to leave people with?
Well, just with a little bit of hope that, it may seem like you're in it and it'll, be a long-term deal, but, just just keep educating yourself and using EAR and using BIF. Those things go a long way. Be a good role model for your kids. Have a support group and love yourself.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You have a great show, and it's you're doing a great service to help a lot of people.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate that. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. If you like what you hear, head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in and leave me a review. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at the Divorce Survival Guide. I'll see you next time, and until then, remember, you, my love, deserve to be happy.